In 586 BCE, Babylon conquered Judah and took its leading citizens captive. And exiled in Babylon, they yearned to hear prophecies of their return home, and many false prophets gave them false hope. But all that was just fake news. Jeremiah alone told them what they needed to hear. The Lord says, you'll be here for a while. Might as well get used to it. Build homes, plant gardens, get to know your enemies as neighbors. In 215 CE, Hussam and Shanez and their children, the Al-Sufi family, came to Canada, refugees from the war in Syria, hoping for a life free from gunfire, bombs, and the constant threat of death. They did as the Lord commanded the Judahites, and they built a life in the new land, which included opening a modest restaurant on Queen Street West called Sufis, where the staff wore t-shirts that said, "From Syria with love." And within 2 years, Sufis became a beloved go-to destination for Syrian cuisine in Toronto. Then late last month, Hussam and Shanez's son, Allah, joined a demonstration outside a political rally for Maxime Bernier's new People's Party. And he was caught on tape standing next to other protesters who blocked Dorothy Marston, an 81-year-old woman with a walker, from getting inside. And when it came to light that Allah had been one of the demonstrators, the family issued a statement of apology. Allah regrets that he did not step aside, or that he did not stand up against the verbal abuse that occurred against Ms. Marston, and he would love an opportunity to personally extend his apologies to her. Our family and our business do not condone acts of hate, violence, or harassment in any shape or form, and we advocate for peace, equality, and free speech for all human beings. The Lord says, you'll be here a while. Might as well get used to it. Build homes, plant gardens, get to know your enemies as neighbors. But it was too late to stem the tide of hatred coming at them from the white supremacists from across Canada and the United States. Allah's name and his contact information was circulated online among far-right hate groups so that people could target him directly. And for weeks, Allah received death threats. His family, the staff at the restaurant, have all been threatened. And last Sunday, Allah was beaten up. And on Monday, the family announced that they were overwhelmed by the hatred and violence and would close their restaurant. Life in the new land had turned bitter, indeed. In light of the story of the Judahites in exile and the Al-Sufi family in Canada, I can't help but think about seeing Thanksgiving through the eyes of the newcomer. Today, many of us will sit around comfortable tables, eat more than our fair share, and try to stay pleasant to the relative that needles us. But once upon a time, Thanksgiving was about falling on your knees and giving thanks to God once again for saving us from winter's famine. According to Canada's History.ca, the first yearly feast of settlers giving thanks to God in the land that we now call Canada actually occurred 15 years before the Plymouth Plantation celebrated the feast that is commonly credited as the originator of our holiday. 1606 was the year that Samuel de Champlain and the French people shared a Thanksgiving feast with the Mi'kmaq people. And if it were not for the First Nations tribe who taught them how to survive in this new land, there would have been little to nothing to give thanks for. Fun fact, Thanksgiving Day cranberries, with their high vitamin C content, were not simply a paltry necklace back then, but an essential ingredient to stave off scurvy. This was but one of the many ways indigenous knowledge helped the settlers to survive. The Lord says, "You'll be here a while. Might as well get used to it. Build homes, plant gardens, get to know your neighbors as your enemies as your neighbors." I've also been thinking about Luke's story, about the 10 men with the skin disease who beg for mercy and healing for Jesus. And he tells them to go and see the priest, but before they even get there, the skin disease is gone. And one of the men turns back to Jesus, falls on his knees, and gives thanks to God. And Jesus says, "Your faith has made you well." And that last line is also translated sometimes to "your faith has made you whole," or "your faith has saved you." And curiously, this wholeness, this wellness that the man feels is not connected to the physical illness. For all 10 men are healed of the skin disease. But according to Jesus, only this man is made whole, apparently by his gratitude. And equally curious is that he was a Samaritan, holding spiritual views that most Jews would denounce as apostasy. The text says he was a foreigner, and yet Jesus says this foreigner's faith was salvific, which means his faith was not dependent on a set of religious beliefs, but simply on the recognition that God was the source of life, the source of healing. It's said that when C.S. Lewis was exploring his newfound faith in God, he discovered a connection between a person's well-being and gratitude, and he wrote about it, and he said this: "I noticed how the humblest and at the same time most balanced minds praised the most, while the cranks and the misfits and the malcontents praise the least." Praise almost seems to be inner health made audible. And I love that. Praise is inner health made audible. And the research, of course, shows what C.S. Lewis suspected, that gratitude is correlated to well-being. The Lord says, "You'll be here a while. Might as well get used to it. Build homes, plant gardens, get to know your enemies as your neighbor." On Tuesday, Mohammed Fakih went to visit Hussam and Shanez. Now, Mohammed is a Lebanese-Canadian businessman and a philanthropist who has also been the target of hate in Canada. He knows what it's like. And he recently won a lawsuit against a man from Mississauga who harassed and defamed him in person and online. And when asked to respond to the judge's ruling, Muhammad Fakih said, "I did not do this for me, but for my kids to know that people who bully and spew hatred are wrong. Canada has appeared as a beacon of hope and harmony, and we must keep it that way. We must keep Canada warm and welcoming." And when Muhammad sat down with the Al-Sufi family, he pointed to the hundreds and hundreds of love letters that their restaurant had received from Torontonians who were sad to see it close, and he said, "This is Canada. Hate has no place here. To triumph over hate, we need a steady gaze and a firm spine. Please," he said, "you must let me help you reopen your restaurant." And he promised them a team of managers, which he would pay for, to run the restaurant while the family took the time they needed to recover from their trauma. And all the restaurant's proceeds would remain in the hands of the Al-Sufis. He promised them that if they reopened, Canada would stand with them in love. On Friday, the restaurant reopened, and all day long there was a lineup of guests out the door waiting to get in. Sadly, there was also a small group of white supremacists protesting their existence in Canada. The Lord says, "You will be here a while. Might as well get used to it. Build homes, plant gardens, get to know your enemies as neighbors." Just yesterday, David, who is the son of Dorothy Marston, the woman who was bullied outside the People's Party rally, sat down with the Al-Sufi family. He tweeted out a picture of himself with Hussam and Shanez, and he wrote this: "What a wonderful privilege and honor it was to meet Mr. and Mrs. Sufi. They are an amazing addition to my Canadian family. Reason and tolerance without screaming and fear is what we need. Fears have to be addressed or they will grow. I now have a fellow Harley-riding brother." Brothers, they are now part of David's family, and he hopes to bring his mother to meet them soon. The first Thanksgiving was celebrated by newcomers who were welcomed and saved by the indigenous peoples of this land. This year, a family of newcomers was welcomed and their livelihoods saved by Canadians named Muhammad and David. Thanks be to God. The Lord says, "You'll be here a while. Might as well get used to it. Build homes, plant gardens, get to know your enemies as neighbors." And Jesus says, "My friends, there is so much to be thankful for this Thanksgiving. And through our practice of gratitude, we will be saved." Amen.